I spent $25,000 on revenge against my cheating husband. Today he sent a text saying he'd be home late from work. Again. I stared at my phone, watching the words blur as tears filled my eyes. This was the fourth time this week, and it was only Wednesday. Working late had become David's favorite excuse ever since I'd seen him at Romano's Italian restaurant last Friday night. Not with clients like he'd told me. With her. Ashley Martinez from his dealership, 25 years old, with perfect blonde highlights and a laugh that carried across the entire restaurant. They were sharing tiramisu, and his hand was covering hers on the table. My husband of 12 years was feeding dessert to another woman while I sat at home helping our kids with homework. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I smiled when he came home smelling like her perfume and listened to his elaborate story about a difficult customer who needed extra attention. I even asked if he wanted me to heat up the dinner I'd kept warm for him. But inside, something cold and calculating had taken root. The next morning, while David showered and the kids ate breakfast, I opened his laptop. His browser history told me everything I needed to know. Hotel websites, jewelry stores, restaurant reservations for two. My hands shook as I scrolled through months of evidence that my marriage was a lie. That's when I made the decision that would destroy everything. 3 hours later, I was sitting in First National Bank across from a loan officer named Janet who couldn't have been older than 25. She smiled brightly as she explained the personal loan process. With your husband's excellent credit score and steady employment history, we can approve up to $25,000, she said, sliding papers across her desk. The monthly payment would be $467 over 60 months. I forged David's signature without hesitation. Then I drove to Community Credit Union, where a different loan officer approved another $15,000. By the end of the week, I had visited 6 different financial institutions. Total approved credit, $73,000. But I only took $25,000. Enough to destroy Ashley Martinez's life the way she was destroying mine. Mrs. Mitchell? The voice on the phone was professional but insistent. This is Marcus from Ace Collections. We need to discuss your husband's overdue payments. It had been exactly 31 days since I'd taken the money. 31 days since I'd hired private investigator Raymond Torres to follow Ashley. 31 days since I'd paid him $12,000 to photograph her every move, document her routines, and gather enough dirt to ruin her reputation. The remaining $13,000 had gone to other expenses. $5,000 to a cybersecurity expert who specialized in social media destruction. $3,000 to a marketing firm that could flood Ashley's online presence with negative reviews and fake complaints. $2,000 to a lawyer who helped me file anonymous complaints with the state licensing board about Ashley's alleged unethical sales practices. $3,000 in miscellaneous costs for creating fake identities and phone numbers. There must be some mistake, I told Marcus, my voice steady despite my racing heart. My husband hasn't taken out any loans recently. Ma'am, we have documentation showing David Mitchell signed for a $25,000 personal loan on March 15th. The first payment was due April 15th, and we haven't received anything. I hung up and immediately called David at work. Sarah? What's wrong? You never call me during the day. David, has anyone from a collections agency tried to reach you? Silence. Then, what are you talking about? Someone called about a loan payment. I told them there was a mistake. I'll handle it, he said quickly. Probably just identity theft. Don't worry about it. But I could hear the confusion in his voice. He genuinely had no idea what I'd done. That evening, David came home early for the first time in weeks. He was pale and clutching a stack of papers. Sarah, we need to talk. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, trying to appear normal while my heart hammered against my ribs. What about? I went to the bank today. Apparently, someone took out multiple loans using my information. $25,000 from First National. $15,000 from Community Credit Union. Another $12,000 from 2 other places. I turned around slowly, putting on my best concerned wife expression. Oh my God. How is that possible? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He spread the papers across our kitchen table. Look at these signatures. They look exactly like mine. Because they were mine, perfected after 15 years of signing birthday cards and Christmas presents with his name. Have you contacted the police? I asked. The bank said I need to file a fraud report, but Sarah. He looked at me with those brown eyes that once made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. The timing is weird. All these loans were taken out in the same week last month. What if someone we know did this? My blood ran cold. What do you mean? I mean, who else would have access to my social security number, my employment information, my bank details? This had to be someone who knows our personal information. I turned back to the stove, stirring pasta sauce that didn't need stirring. Are you suggesting I did this? No, of course not. But maybe someone close to us? Lisa's been having money problems since her divorce. Or maybe someone at work got access to my files. Lisa, my best friend since college. The woman who'd been my maid of honor and godmother to our children. David was willing to suspect her before he'd suspect his own wife. We should call Lisa, I said carefully. If someone's using our information, they might be targeting her too. But even as I suggested it, I felt sick. Lisa had been acting strange lately, avoiding my calls, canceling our coffee dates, always seeming nervous when I brought up David. At the time, I'd attributed it to stress from her recent divorce. Now I wondered if there was another reason. Actually, David said, scrolling through his phone, I should probably call Marcus first. He's been trying to reach me all day. My phone buzzed with a text message. Raymond Torres. Phase 1 complete. Have comprehensive file on target. Ready for Phase 2 when you are. I deleted the message and looked up to find David staring at me. Who was that? Nobody. Marketing call. But David's expression had changed. He was looking at me the way he looked at customers he suspected of lying about their trade-in values. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Do you know anything about these loans? The question hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. This was my moment. I could confess everything. Tell him about seeing him with Ashley, about the loans, about the private investigator and the cyber attacks. I could throw myself on his mercy and beg forgiveness. Instead, I looked him straight in the eye and said, David, how could you even ask me that? I'm your wife. I would never do anything to hurt our family. The next morning, David left for work without kissing me goodbye. He'd spent the night on the couch, claiming he needed to review the loan documents, but I knew the real reason. Trust, once cracked, spreads like ice across a frozen pond. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner, then called Raymond Torres. Phase 2, I said when he answered. You sure about this, Mrs. Mitchell? Once we implement Phase 2, there's no going back. I'm sure. Phase 2 was the nuclear option. Raymond would deliver the photographs and documentation of Ashley's affair with my husband directly to her current boyfriend, a mechanic named Tony who, according to Raymond's research, had serious anger management issues and a criminal record for assault. It'll cost another $8,000, Raymond said. Plus expenses for the setup. Fine. I'd have to take out another loan. But watching Ashley's world burn would be worth every penny. That afternoon, while picking up my daughter Emma from soccer practice, I ran into Lisa at the grocery store. She was in the cereal aisle, looking thin and tired. Sarah. Hi. Her smile seemed forced. How are you? I'm fine. How are you holding up? Oh, one day at a time. She paused, fidgeting with her shopping basket. Actually, I've been meaning to call you. David came by my office yesterday. My stomach dropped. He did. He was asking about loan fraud. Apparently someone's been taking out credit in his name. She studied my face carefully. He seemed to think it might be someone we know. What did you tell him? The truth. That I haven't seen any suspicious activity, and I'd never do anything like that. Lisa stepped closer, lowering her voice. Sarah, is everything okay between you and David? He seemed really stressed. Everything's fine. But Lisa's expression suggested she didn't believe me. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's wrong, I said everything's fine, Lisa. She flinched at my sharp tone. Okay. If you need anything. I watched her walk away, her shoulders hunched with worry. Lisa had been my closest friend for 18 years. She'd held my hand during both my pregnancies, helped me through my mother's death, celebrated every promotion and anniversary. And here I was, lying to her face while my husband suspected her of fraud. But I couldn't stop now. The machine I'd set in motion had too much momentum. That evening, David came home with Detective Rodriguez from the Phoenix Police Department. Rodriguez was a compact woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mrs. Mitchell, we're investigating identity theft involving your husband's financial information. I'd like to ask you a few questions." Of course. I invited them to sit in our living room, offering coffee that no one wanted. "Can you think of anyone who might have access to your husband's personal information?" "Social security number, employment details, bank account numbers." "Well, his coworkers at the dealership would have some of that information. And our accountant, obviously. Lisa Parker helps us with our taxes every year." I hated myself for mentioning Lisa's name, but I needed to deflect suspicion. "Has your husband been acting differently lately? Any changes in routine, new stress, anything unusual?" David shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Well, I have been working longer hours lately. Big sales push at the dealership. Any recent disputes? Arguments with coworkers, customers, family members?" "No," David said quickly. "Nothing like that." But Detective Rodriguez was looking at me. "Mrs. Mitchell? Any family disputes or unusual stress?" "We're fine," I said. "Just normal work pressure and parenting stress. Nothing out of the ordinary." Rodriguez made notes in her small notebook. "The loans were taken out at 6 different institutions over a 5-day period. That suggests someone with specific knowledge of your husband's credit profile and a systematic approach to fraud." "What does that mean?" David asked. "It means this wasn't random. Whoever did this knew your husband well enough to forge his signature convincingly and had detailed information about his finances." After Rodriguez left, David turned to me with haunted eyes. "Sarah, this is serious. If they can't find who did this, I'm responsible for all that debt. We could lose the house." "That won't happen," I said automatically. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I was going to confess. Tonight, after the kids went to bed, I would tell him everything. About seeing him with Ashley, about the loans, about Raymond Torres, and the revenge scheme that had spiraled completely out of control." But then my phone rang. "Mrs. Mitchell?" The voice was unfamiliar and angry. "This is Tony Restrepo. I think we need to talk about your husband and my girlfriend." My heart stopped. Raymond had delivered the photographs. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed. "I've got pictures, lady. Your husband and Ashley at the Marriott downtown. Multiple dates, multiple hotels. Now I find out she's been lying to me for months." David was staring at me, trying to figure out who was calling. "I think you have the wrong number," I said. "No, I've got the right number. Ashley gave it to me. Said you've been harassing her at work, following her around, posting fake reviews about her online. She's scared, and now I know why. You knew about the affair." The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. David picked it up. "Hello? Who is this?" I couldn't hear Tony's side of the conversation, but I watched my husband's face transform from confusion to shock to devastation. "I see," David said finally. "Thank you for calling." He hung up and looked at me with the expression of a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse. "Sarah, David, I can explain, you knew." His voice was barely a whisper. "You knew about Ashley and you." "Jesus Christ, Sarah. The loans. You took out those loans." I couldn't deny it anymore. "Yes. How long have you known?" 6 weeks. "And instead of talking to me, instead of giving us a chance to work this out, you decided to destroy our financial future and terrorize Ashley." "She destroyed our marriage. I destroyed our marriage," David shouted, then immediately lowered his voice, glancing toward the stairs where our children were supposedly sleeping. "I'm the one who cheated. I'm the one who lied. Ashley doesn't even know you exist." "She knows now." David sat down heavily on the couch, his head in his hands. "What have you done, Sarah? What have we done to our kids?" "We can fix this," I said desperately. "We can call the banks, explain that it was a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding." David looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You committed fraud, Sarah. multiple counts. And now Ashley's boyfriend is involved, and he sounds dangerous, and Detective Rodriguez is investigating, and our children are going to find out that both their parents are liars. I was protecting our family. You were protecting your pride. David stood up and walked to the window. I was going to tell you about Ashley. Last week, actually. I was going to end it and ask you to go to counseling with me. I don't believe you. I don't care what you believe anymore. He turned back to face me. I'm sleeping at Mike's tonight. Tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. Not for the fraud case, for a divorce. David, please $25,000, Sarah. You spent $25,000 on revenge instead of fighting for our marriage. What does that tell you about who we've become? He left without packing a bag, without saying goodbye to the kids, without looking back. I stood in our empty living room, surrounded by the wreckage of 18 years together, and finally understood the true cost of my revenge. It wasn't $25,000. It was everything. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, police interviews, and difficult conversations with our children. Emma, our 12-year-old, handled the news with typical preteen stoicism, but 8-year-old Jake cried every night, asking when Daddy was coming home. David hired Linda Chin, a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces. I hired whoever I could afford after setting aside money for criminal defense. Detective Rodriguez arrested me on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work. The charges were multiple counts of identity theft, fraud, and forgery. The total amount of the loans I'd taken, $25,000, elevated the charges to felony level. Mrs. Mitchell, Rodriguez said as she placed handcuffs on my wrists, you have the right to remain silent. The perp walk past my neighbors was the longest 50 feet of my life. Raymond Torres had disappeared after Tony Restrepo filed a police report about harassment. The private investigator's office was empty, his phone disconnected, his website offline. Apparently, I wasn't his first client to require a hasty exit strategy. Ashley Martinez filed a restraining order against me and sued for defamation. Her lawyer presented evidence of the fake online reviews, the false licensing board complaints, and the social media harassment campaign. The civil suit demanded $50,000 in damages. David moved in with his brother temporarily and filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. He was also facing potential liability for the loans I'd taken in his name, despite being an innocent victim. But the worst part wasn't the legal consequences or the financial ruin. It was the look in my children's eyes when they realized their mother was a criminal. Mommy, Jake asked during one of our supervised visits, why did you do something bad? How do you explain to an 8-year-old that you destroyed your family's life because you were too proud to have an adult conversation with his father? Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices when they're hurt and angry, I said, pulling him close. I made terrible choices, and now our whole family has to face the consequences. But you're still my mommy. I will always be your mommy. Nothing will ever change that. Even if you have to go to jail. Even then. My criminal defense attorney, Patricia Walsh, was brutally honest about my chances. $25,000 in fraudulent loans, plus the harassment campaign, plus the clear premeditation evidenced by your hiring a private investigator. Sarah, the prosecution has an airtight case. Your best option is to plead guilty and hope for a lenient sentence. What kind of sentence? 2 to 5 years, probably. With good behavior, you could be out in 18 months. 18 months away from my children. 18 months of them visiting their mother in prison. 18 months of Emma having to explain to her friends why her mom was a convicted felon. There is one factor that might work in your favor, Patricia continued. You're a first-time offender, and the circumstances show emotional distress rather than financial gain. If you show genuine remorse and make full restitution, the judge might consider alternatives to incarceration. What kind of alternatives? House arrest with electronic monitoring. Extensive community service. Mandatory counseling. You'd still have a felony conviction, but you'd be home with your kids. What would I need to do? Pay back every penny you stole. That means $25,000 to the banks, plus interest and fees. Another $20,000 minimum for Ashley's legal costs and damages. $50,000 total, conservatively. I laughed bitterly. I don't have $50,000. That's why I took out the loans in the first place. Then you need to find it. Family, friends, selling assets. Because if you can't make restitution, you're going to prison. My parents lived on a fixed income in rural Kansas. David's family had cut all contact after the arrest. Our house was heavily mortgaged, and my car was worth maybe $8,000. That left one option. I called Lisa. Sarah? Her voice was cautious when she answered. How are you holding up? Not well. Lisa, I need to ask you something, and I understand if you say no. What is it? I need to borrow $50,000. Silence. I know it's a lot, I continued quickly, and I know I have no right to ask after what I've done. But if I can't make restitution, I'm going to prison. My kids will lose both parents. Sarah. Lisa's voice was gentle but firm. I don't have $50,000. My divorce cost me $30,000 in legal fees. I'm barely making my mortgage payments. Please, Lisa. I'm desperate. Even if I had the money, I couldn't loan it to you. Not after what you did to David, to Ashley, to your own children. You made choices, Sarah. You have to live with the consequences. She was right, of course. But hearing it from my oldest friend felt like another death. I understand, I said. I'm sorry for asking. Sarah, wait. Lisa's voice softened. I can't give you money, but I can give you something else. The truth. What truth? I knew about David and Ashley. I've known for months. My blood turned to ice. What? I saw them together at a restaurant in Scottsdale. David made me promise not to tell you. He said he was going to end it, and that telling you would only hurt you unnecessarily. You knew. My voice was barely a whisper. You knew, and you said nothing? He was my friend too, Sarah. I was trying to protect both of you. By lying to me for months? By giving him a chance to do the right thing. Lisa paused, which he was trying to do, until you destroyed everything. I hung up without saying goodbye. Lisa had known. My husband had been planning to end the affair. And I had systematically destroyed all of it based on assumptions and pride and a thirst for revenge that had poisoned everything I touched. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for October 15th, exactly 7 months after I'd taken the first loan. Patricia Walsh presented character references from my former coworkers, my children's teachers, and our family pastor. She emphasized my lack of prior criminal history and my role as a single mother. The prosecution presented bank records showing the systematic nature of my fraud, screenshots of the fake online reviews I'd created, and testimony from Ashley Martinez about the harassment campaign that had cost her job and her relationship. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, the defendant's actions weren't the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. They represent a calculated, months-long criminal enterprise designed to destroy multiple lives. The defendant showed no remorse until she was caught, and she only seeks leniency now because she faces consequences. Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the case files before addressing me directly. Mrs. Mitchell, you've pleaded guilty to 3 felony counts of identity theft and fraud. You've acknowledged taking $25,000 that didn't belong to you and using those funds to orchestrate a harassment campaign against an innocent woman. Do you have anything to say before I impose sentence? I stood on shaking legs. Your Honor, I know that nothing I say can undo the harm I've caused. I destroyed my marriage, traumatized my children, and hurt people who never deserved it. I was angry and hurt, but that's no excuse for what I did. I take full responsibility for my choices, and I'm committed to making things right, whatever the cost. Judge Morrison nodded. Mrs. Mitchell, your crimes were serious and premeditated. However, I'm persuaded by the evidence that this behavior was aberrant for you, driven by emotional trauma rather than financial gain. Therefore, I'm sentencing you to 2 years in state prison, suspended, with 5 years of supervised probation. You will serve 6 months of house arrest with electronic monitoring, perform 2,000 hours of community service, and make full restitution to all victims within 2 years. You will also attend mandatory counseling for anger management and financial responsibility. Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Mitchell, this is your second chance. If you violate probation in any way, you will serve the full 2-year prison sentence. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. The electronic ankle monitor was installed the next day. For 6 months, I couldn't leave my house except for work, grocery shopping, and mandatory counseling sessions. The device tracked my every movement, and any unauthorized departure would send me straight to prison. My children came to live with me again, though David maintained primary custody and made it clear that any violation of my probation would result in permanent loss of my parental rights. The house felt like a prison, but it was better than an actual prison. The restitution payments consumed every penny I earned. After basic living expenses, everything went to paying back the banks and Ashley Martinez. I worked overtime whenever possible, took on freelance bookkeeping projects, sold everything valuable I owned. It would take exactly 2 years to pay back $53,000 in total damages. 2 years of living paycheck to paycheck. 2 years of supervised probation. 2 years of community service every weekend. 2 years of mandatory counseling sessions where I dissected every decision that led to the destruction of my life. But I would survive. My children would have their mother. And eventually, I might even forgive myself. The day my probation ended, I received a letter with no return address. Sarah, it read, "I wanted you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. David and I are no longer together. What you did was wrong, but I understand why you did it. I hope you can rebuild your life and find peace." Ashley, I folded the letter carefully and put it in the box with all my legal documents from the case. Evidence of the worst chapter of my life, but also proof that I'd survived it. My children were 13 and 9 now. Emma barely remembered the chaos of the court case, and Jake had adapted to our new normal with the resilience of childhood. They knew their mother had made terrible mistakes, but they also knew she'd fought to stay in their lives. David and I would never reconcile. Trust, once broken so completely, couldn't be repaired. But we'd learned to co-parent civilly for the sake of our children. I'd lost my marriage, my savings, my reputation, and 2 years of my life. But I'd kept my children. And finally, I understood that some things are worth more than revenge. Even when revenge costs $25,000. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and please share this story with anyone who might understand the complex emotions of betrayal and forgiveness.